All right, Steve. Well, it's so nice to finally meet you.
You too, because you were an early bean adapter.
Uh-huh.
When I first started, you were one of the first people to write, and you found it on your own. I wasn't, didn't send you influencer stuff. You just found these beans, and you started, I think, writing about Good Mother Stollard, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I've been using your beans, it feels like forever. But now, I
And that
mean,
so
now it's everywhere. I mean, you must be, I mean, as awful as this pandemic has been for everyone, I imagine in terms of the business side of things, it must have been good for you.
it was. We had the New York Times last spring, and that we were 6 weeks out on orders. It took us 6 weeks to fulfill orders, which was a nightmare. And then we had CBS News in December, and the two of those things just killed us in a good way.
Yeah. Yeah. A good
It's,
nightmare to have, I guess.
yeah, it's the hard part is you have your bean freaks who've been so supportive from the word go, and suddenly they can't get the beans they want, and some of them weren't as open and loving as they might have been.
Yeah, I'm sure that's funny because people are always saying to me, because I cook all the time, are you going to open a restaurant? I'm like, no, because
Oh,
I can't deal with customers. I can't deal with
yeah.
people sending food back or being unsatisfied. It's just frustrating.
We have the Bean Club, which is quarterly shipments, and you're not in that, are you?
I mean, I would love to be. I thought it was a very selective group of people.
I only let certain people in. No, there's a waiting list. So there's 11,000 people in it, and the waiting list is 40,000 today.
See, yeah. I mean, I don't want to cut the line, so
Okay.
I'll get on the. I'll be 40,001 on the list, and when
Okay.
it's time,
But it
let
does
me
it
in.
does move. It takes about a year, we're saying, and we're working really hard to open it up to more people. But because of the New York Times article, we were about 2 weeks late with the Bean Club shipment in, I think, March or April. And the reaction from people was so negative. I mean, my people, and they're like, "Oh, we're family, and family doesn't do this to each other." And it's like,
Oh
well,
my god.
we're not family. Just FYI, it's the business and a client. And yeah, I'm sorry, but it's not the worst thing that could happen.
I always found your beans. I mean, throughout the pandemic, I actually was going to show you. I have your yellow eye here, and I've got some yellow Indian woman here.
Wow.
So I don't know. Maybe LA had a good thing going with you guys, because I would always find them at different stores and different places I
Oh,
would go.
sure. You can
Yeah.
find them in different stores. And the other thing is, the Bean Club's only one part, so you don't have to be in the Bean Club to enjoy heirloom beans. I mean, there's other options. And
Oh
there's
yeah, of course. And we should say for people who don't know that your beans are, I mean, you're not gonna toot your own horn, but they are. I'll say they're some of the most extraordinary beans you can have, and they really changed my mind about beans as like a special occasion food or something to look forward to. Because I think growing up, I don't think I ever looked forward to beans as a kid, and then
where did you grow up?
well, I grew up in New York and then Florida,
Oh wow,
and then I think like baked beans I liked, like the
sure.
classic American baked beans. But your beans really opened my eyes to the potential of what a bean can be, and I cook them all the time.
I love that. That's so great. And
But yeah, oh, go
when I
ahead.
first started though, there really wasn't anyone doing commercial heirloom beans. I mean, it really was, you go to the grocery store and you get 8-year-old beans in a filthy plastic pouch. And
Mhm.
if you're an old hippie, you got them at your food co-op. But they're really, and if you're Italian, you grew your own, I think is what a lot of people did. And most heirlooms were grown by hobby farmers and gardening enthusiasts. And I just remember thinking, I'm in Napa, and we know every obscure Italian balsamic vinegar, all these things, yet we don't even know our own food. So my goal early on was I would like the average home cook to know what a Rio Zape is and know
Mhm.
exactly when they should use it. And we're getting there. We're not quite there, but it's been pretty good.
Well, I also feel like you were ahead of the trend in terms of like provenance and sort of just now people want. I think people care more now about these kinds of things than maybe they did 10 years ago or 15 years ago because of Top Chef and all
Yeah.
these all the different media that's out there about food. People are, I think, more interested in heirloom ingredients
Well,
or
they are. And the thing is, it's not like I thought, oh, I have this great business plan and this is
Mhm.
how I will make a living. It's just, I love them. I started taking them to farmers markets, and little by little, the thing snowballed. So you'd be pretty idiotic to think this was a good idea as a business plan.
My
But
only question for you, okay, so you have to get this all the time, and then we're gonna get to your therapy. So I hope you're ready to be diagnosed
I'm a
after.
mess, so bring them on.
Oh, okay. Well, okay, and you get this all the time, but I'm going to ask you about like the stomach issues that sometimes creep up with beans, because I've struggled with that a little bit. And what's your advice in terms of people who have challenges or struggle to digest beans?
Well, to keep it to yourself because no one really cares. Just start. No, and I think this guy, I can't remember his name, and I'm sorry, but there was a doctor who wrote a book on flatulence, and it was called "To Err Is Human." And I mean, just like, this is what the body does. It means your body's functioning, and there's really no problem. But I mean, the more I have a pretty fibrous diet, and it really isn't an issue for me. So I think if you eat a lot of hamburgers and French fries and gorgeous desserts, and then all of a sudden you have a big bowl of Royal Coronas, and you think, oh my God, these are great. And then you have a second bowl, then you get what in the industry we call a gift with purchase.
Free gift,
yeah. I mean, stuff happens. I don't know. I don't know. I'm sorry. It's just.
I think your beans might have ended some marriages along the way because
it might be true, but on the flip side, I actually got a Twitter from somebody who says she added her Bean Club status to her Tinder profile, and she's having a lot more action. Because
there you go.
So
that's so funny. Well, I mean, I feel like your different beans have different effects on me depending on which ones I have.
Oh, that could be.
Yeah.
And, the Tepary beans, which are our only indigenous bean in North America, actually have higher fiber and higher protein. Mm-hmm. So they would. And also, there's a terroir issue. I mean, they really taste differently depending on which field they're grown in. I mean, so there's all these issues. So, I mean, it could be a sensitive system.
Well, I don't want to dwell on this, but thank you for indulging me. But I was going to ask you, before we get to your therapy, do you ever get sick of beans, like dealing with beans, like and this being your thing? I mean, did you ever think it would go this far and you'd still be talking about it all these years later?
No, I over the weekend went to a party because I'm actually like entering the world again.
Yes.
And it was funny that, there's a fat old guy, like, oh, whatever. And then they're like, oh, you're Rancho Gordo. And all that was the belle of the ball. And then they want to know, like, how did you get started? It's like, oh my God. It's like, one, it's like, haven't you been listening? Because I've been talking for 20 years. And two, it's like, oh, it's a party. But then you just put a nickel in me and I start going. And it's like, it's really fun because I don't get sick of beans. And I do get a little sick of talking about salting and soaking, but it's an intimidating thing. Here's a hard rock and you're going to turn it into something creamy. I need some help. This doesn't work for me. So I totally get that. But no, and I eat beans. I probably have on the average about half a cup a day. I eat them all the time.
Wow.
And I just had my blood work done and I don't really know what all the numbers mean, but everyone's like, oh, your LDL levels are excellent. Like,
oh, good.
I think we know why, doctor.
So you're not just a Bean Club president, you're also a client.
That one, we just introduced a black bean from Chiapas, Mexico. And when my partners in Mexico sent it to me, I thought, I need another black bean, like I need a hole in the head. We have so many. Yeah. And it's like, I ate it and it's like, oh, we have to have this. So this sweet little village now in Chiapas, we're getting 30,000 pounds of this bean. And they can't sell them in Mexico because there's really not a market for them really outside of their village. And they go to Mexico City and often the chefs are a little, I don't want to use the word snobby, but they're snobby. And then all of a sudden these gringos are saying, no, these are so good that we want 30,000 pounds of them. And it really is, to me, this is also why I love doing what I'm doing because it sort of justifies that. I mean, you're validating them in a way that they're not getting at home.
And you're changing their lives probably economically to suddenly
buy
all these.
You have to kind of be careful about that, which is also why we're also really careful. Like I want your grandmother's beans. People think sometimes we grow beans in Mexico because they're cheaper and actually those are even more expensive. Mm-hmm. We're doing it because they're fabulous beans. The bulk of our production is here in California.
Got it.
A lot of people don't know that. They assume everything's Mexican.
Yeah, I didn't know that. Okay.
I'm a native son of the Golden West, and I want to produce things. I'm so tired of ideas and services. It's like, no, let's make something. So we make food.
I feel like, and we're about to get to your lunch, but if this podcast, there's a podcast called Desert Island Discs where they ask people like which albums they'd bring to a desert island. But I kind of want to ask you which beans you would bring to a desert island of your many beans. But maybe just pick one and then we'll get to your lunch. Is that too hard? It's like your children, like choosing your favorite child.
My favorite child. I certainly have one, but I'm very careful not to talk about it. No, I think Good Mother Stollards. Well, I pick one of each. Like I need the dark, I need a light, and I need a medium one. So I think Good Mother Stallard for sure is one of them.
Uh-huh.
And which we, of course, we never have, but we're working really hard. We actually this year have a 20-acre test farm, and we're actually testing to see like if you plant them this way, if you add more water, or if you do, companion, is anything going to help? But the cool thing is we're actually using it to show young farmers like how we're doing it so that they can get involved too. Because your average farmer is not a millennial. Just, like they're a little older, and we've got to really encourage younger farmers and help create markets for them, is what I would say.
All right, Steve. Well, the time has come to ask you, what did you have for lunch today?
Well, so it's as usual, I sort of do I live on leftovers, and I love that to me. So Tamar Adler has that beautiful book called An Endless Feast.
Everlasting Meal.
Thank you. You wouldn't know I love it. I loved it so much, though. I bought it in paperback, and then I'm going to get this in hardback because I don't want this thing to go. I mean, all the little things you knew along the way, she solidifies for you and actually helps you make sense of it. And to me, the smartest one is you go to the farmer's market, and the first thing you do is put everything in your refrigerator, and it starts going bad. So no, you should actually cook it when it's at its peak. And when you have a refrigerator full of cooked ingredients, you can create anything. So today I love poaching chicken, because if you poach chicken, you also get free soup, basically. So I poach the chicken, shred it, put the stock in one thing, and then I have the chicken somewhere else. I had, of course, cooked beans, which I'm not supposed to say, but I had Good Mother Stallard because I'm the boss and I have a secret supply of them.
Right. You deserve them. I mean, yes. You earned them.
And I had cooked cactus paddles, nopales, from our parking lot here at Rancho Gordo. We have a lot of them, so we cut them and cook those. I cooked those. And then I also had some clay pot mushrooms it's a Paula Wolfert recipe where you cook just button mushrooms and clay, and it's the most delicious thing. So I had all those things in different containers, and I made sort of a bowl with it, and it was absolutely delicious.
That does sound delicious.
I wouldn't serve it to company, but so one of the reasons I contacted you is when you had Cole Escola on.
Yeah.
And I think he is the funniest person alive, and he won't believe this, but I've been watching those old videos that he and Jeffrey Self did before they even had the Bravo or the. Is it Bravo? No, what's the?
No, it was Logo
show. Yeah. And it's like to find out that he eats almost as penance was so heartbreaking to me. It's like, how is someone so funny? Like, that's the whole point of all this awful work we do. For me, is to sit around a table and break bread with people you love.
Right.
I don't love, sometimes I have some out of control foodie friends where it's like, oh, this is some obscure food thing and it has to be novel. But breaking bread with people you love is the whole point of everything to me. So it was like shocking. Someone who provides so much humor and joy is like, oh, that's.
Well, yeah. I mean, I've discovered that in my life though, because it's like I have this passion as you do too, but it's sort of I have to accept that some people have completely different passions.
Sure.
Like Cole loves like old movies and Barbara Stanwyck and stuff. Yeah. It's just like I feel like you just have to, because for me, I totally agree with you. It's disturbing to me. I remember that there was this friend that married this guy who said that if he could just drink or take a pill every day to eat food, that he would just take the pill every day. And I still have to like hang out with this person, and I try not to judge them for it, but it's like I can't imagine wanting to just eat a pill every day and not eat food.
And for me, it was like basically I'm going to eat so I don't get sick from not eating.
Yes.
Really? Because I wake up dreaming about what I'm going to do for lunch, let alone dinner. So
my first question for you, based on your lunch, I mean, I'm not going to, fully analyze you yet, but it seems like there's a lot of knowledge and history that comes with your lunch. I mean, how to cook a cactus, how to cook, mushrooms in a clay pot, and just this breadth of knowledge, even like about beans and bean cookery. And I'm curious, where did this all come from? Where did you learn all this? Or where did the spark of culinary interest begin for you?
Well, my father was a pretty good cook. My mother wasn't. We used to joke how she would aim the toaster at us with the Pop-Tarts, and we had to dodge. She was so bad.
Is that true? No.
No. I think it was a Lily Tomlin joke she used to do.
Oh, that's funny.
I'm not sure. I don't know where that comes from, but she was horrible. Very appreciative though. And my father's a pretty good cook. So, and we lived back and forth between the two of them over the years. So I think I naturally went towards that. I also think, doctor, when my parents divorced, so it was fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth grade, we moved every single year. So I actually, people don't know this, but I'm somewhat shy. It's true though.
Yeah, I get that. I'm an extroverted introvert myself, so I understand. Yeah.
Like I can't walk into a room and work the room, and I have other friends who just, oh, thank God I get to work the room, and I'm like, oh God, to me it's like the worst thing.
Yeah.
But I think creating a sense of home because of that is really key to me. And I remember when I started high school, my parents, I just said, you two figure it out, but I have to go 4 years at one school. I can't keep doing this. And I think if you look back, it has been, I'm creating a home has been really key. It's the theme throughout my life. And I'm really uneasy if I don't have one. So I think that's it. And then when I actually, through very unusual circumstances, I have 2 children. And I had my youngest son lived with me. And part of that was Sunday supper. And then my mother ended up living next door. So it was the law. We're having Sunday supper. And my mother every week was like, oh, you don't have to. It's like, I know I don't have to, but I have this crap job all week long where I'm working like a dog. This is where I get my pleasure. And we'd have people over. And of course, my son now says that was his favorite times.
Oh, Sunday. That's so nice.
It was worth it. Yeah.
And I really relate to you saying you wanted to create your own home. It's funny. I wonder if I went back through all my old podcasts, how many people have a similar story of one parent or both parents not cooking very well and then wanting to like cook for themselves and make their own home. And that's absolutely true for me too. That's my motivation, is to create a cozy, comforting home for myself.
It might be kind of a control thing too.
Yeah.
Like, the world's kind of nuts. You have created something yourself.
Totally. So when your mom lived next door to you and you would cook for her, was she a gracious guest? I mean, did she enjoy your food?
Mm-hmm. Yes, but she and my son would gang up on me, which is fine. Because they really had nothing to talk about. I did.
They'd gang up on you in terms of like what you cooked and like whether it was
what I cooked, what I did, my little quirks. I tend to be a bit of a collector now and again, and and also I loved having guests over, and they would like, please, no more guests this week. We're really tired. And then of course they run the show. I mean, they loved having the guests. So it was, and I think for a young person, having them at a dinner party and being treated like an adult, and asking to help, and I think it really helped with the development on some level. And I think I had that too, because my dad had a series of stewardesses that would come over for dinner all the time.
What? That's funny.
He was a real playboy.
Okay.
And so, but he always insisted the kids be at the table for the dinner. So we did that.
That's really nice. I think that
helped me to hold my own and also know when to be quiet and when to, roll with it.
I'm curious, when you said you were a real collector, when you were talking about the dinners, what did that mean? Like, what did you mean by that?
Well, I mean, even with the beans, it's like, I don't have a casual interest in anything. It's like, if I think it's interesting, I go for it a lot. So I have probably about 500 Mexican movie posters from the 40s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. I used to collect a lot of music, and I still have, I just could never get rid of the CDs or the LPs. So I have them all still. And my latest thing is vintage silver from Tasco, Mexico, by this designer, William Spratling, who was really interesting because he was at Tulane University and he was roommates with William Faulkner. And then Tulane has a great archaeological program. So they sent him to Mexico. He found Tasco and realized it was an old mining town. And suddenly, almost single-handedly, he created this whole industry and it was the era of Diego Rivera and that crowd. So it was post-revolution. They were finally incorporating indigenous themes, not just a poor man's Europe, which was what the revolution was partly about. So anyway, it's great silver.
So you actually collect like all kinds of stuff.
Yes.
Are you a hoarder?
No. Well, I am, in the sense that I bring it in, but I actually don't get sentimental or upset when it goes out.
Okay.
I do somewhat hoard, and then I do a major cleaning. Like, it's the same thing with cooking, with the freezer. I'm really good at freezing things, but I'm not good about using them once they're in the freezer. So it's sort of this mystery area. And there's a lot of expensive things in there that should be thrown out probably.
I have like soups from like 5 years ago in my freezer that
never
are
know,
probably
you might need
done.
them. Yeah, you
I
never know.
don't know.
Now, and where we live in Northern California too, we have all these power outages now because of the wildfires, in case there's one, and you just lose so much food every time.
Right.
So it's very irritating.
Wait, I wanted to ask you, and this is probably an annoying question for you, but since you said that it was part of your lunch, the good Mother Stollard beans, how do you cook your beans? How do you do it?
Well, I'm so glad you asked. No.
You must answer this like every day, but I have to ask.
No, but the real secret, and I did a thread on this once on Twitter, is you simmer until done. And that's the main thing you have to think about. So there's probably 50 ways of cooking beans. I believe in really making life as difficult for myself as possible. So I cook in clay. So I have a beautiful old clay pot that I turn the heat on, and I use gas. I actually have a beautiful old Wedgwood stove, which really is my hero. But I saute onion and garlic in a little olive oil, or a lot of olive oil, it depends on my mood. Add the beans unsoaked. I cover it by about 2 inches of water, and then I bring it to a super hard boil until it's just going crazy. And I always say lets the beans know you're in charge. And then you turn it down as low as it'll go. And if I'm busy and need to have the beans right away, I'll cook them sort of moderate. But if it's Sunday and I have nothing else going on, I love to put them in the back, and really just an occasional blurb coming up. It's the best way to do it.
And there's nothing else in there, like no garlic or carrots.
Well, I sauteed the onion and garlic first.
Oh, yes,
I used to do carrots and celery, and if it's something for sure super Euro, I will do that. But I think I like it more neutral, because then you can always add stuff later if you don't. But once you add celery and carrots, it definitely has sort of that chicken stock thing.
And do you do the like second cook? Like I've done recipes where like I boil the beans for a while, and then once they're kind of getting soft, then in a separate skillet, I'll saute like a bunch of stuff like mirepoix and bacon, and then add the beans to that, and like sort of a fresher, like, have you done that? No.
But that seems like an extra step and an extra pan to clean.
Yeah, it is. Okay, so I don't need to do that anymore. Just straight out of the pot into the bowl, top with what you want.
And I do it, and I've also done it side by side, where I saute the onion and garlic first and then add the beans. And then other times I just throw it all in a pot, and there is almost no difference. I think I'm helping by sauteing first and releasing the juices, which is so important. And it turns out it's really not.
And did you say, because I feel like this is the question that you mentioned earlier that you get asked all the time, but do you salt early or salt later?
Well, apparently the salting's a myth, but for me, even after all this time, I still don't want this to be the one pot where the myth is true. So there's a point where the beans, so they're boiling or simmering for quite a while, usually about an hour or so, and they stop smelling like the vegetables, they start smelling like beans. And that's when I salt. But some people are doing this brining thing, which I tried and I couldn't tell any difference. And it just seemed like an extra step where you actually soak the beans in salt water, which is not intuitive. And then other people, say you can't salt it at all. So I go back to you just simmer until done. So
Great.
I do know for sure you don't want to put any acids in. So tomatoes, even molasses, all those things impede, they keep them harder. So you really want to not do those until they're fully cooked.
I'm getting a little feedback on the microphone. I don't know what
that was. Was it me?
No, I don't know what that was. I think it's okay now. We're fine. So I wanted to ask you, because you were talking about Mexico and you mentioned this artist who you like, or the silver that you like. And I wanted to ask, like, when did your relationship to Mexico begin, and how did it begin? And when did you first start traveling there?
Well, when I was in high school, which was many moons ago, I was part of the United Farm Workers boycott. So after school, I would go down to the grocery stores and ask people not to buy lettuce and grapes. So I think really early, I was introduced to Mexican culture. Although now looking back, I didn't know anything. I mean, no, I love burritos. I know all about Mexico. So that was kind of my attitude.
Right.
And then I think I really got interested in Cuban music, which led me to kind of pork and lime and rum. And then led me into Mexican food. And then I remember hearing a really good Mexican bolero and thinking, oh no. And Mexico was sort of like pinto beans, and it was like, it's right there. So it doesn't seem that exotic, where Cuba was everything. And it's like, wow. And I think, I always say this, the more I go to Mexico, the less I understand it. Like think I have a pretty good hold on it, and I know probably more than most people, but I have no clue. And I come back just shocked every time. I mean, it's very complex.
Do you ever watch Patty Jinich's show on
Oh yeah,
PBS?
she's wonderful. Yeah.
I love that show. I think it's one of the best cooking shows or food shows on TV right now. And especially
Wow.
I started watching it during the Trump administration when he was like talking so derogatorily about Mexicans and just really just that ugliness. And then you watch her show and she's showing you parts of Mexico and things in Mexico that I had no idea, just places like Sonora and I don't know, places I'd never been and didn't even know to think about. So I just love that show so much. And so also just the rich, vibrant food culture there, just how much, complexity and fascinating things are going on.
What's fascinating too is that's through her eyes, a Jewish Mexican woman. I don't know where she's from exactly, but I mean, there are just so many Mexicos and that's hers. I think she should do a book on Jewish Mexican cooking myself.
That's a good idea.
Totally undertold that story. But then, you see someone like Rick Bayless, who really has a more all-encompassing idea. Diana Kennedy goes narrow and deep.
Right.
Zarela Martinez was, she has her own experience because her mother was a real famous cook, and now she's bred very famous cooks herself. So everyone has this completely different, well, not completely different, but a slightly different perspective, and each one is just as valid, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very conscious these days so I'm working actually on a book of our Rancho Gordo Shashak project, and the Shashak is the other company I work with down there. And I'm sort of now thinking, well, is this really even my story to tell sometimes? Because, sorry, I'm going on a rant.
No, it's interesting.
We need to get back to my horrible mental state soon.
Yeah, we're doing great.
I got back from Oaxaca, and it was just shocking how Instagram has changed the world, and also how Noma, doing that pop-up in Tulum that was so famous, has changed everything. And I don't think it's the gentrification of Oaxaca is like happening super fast, and everybody's taking selfies, and there's sort of this, San Miguel de Allende has sort of a boomer kind of gringo atmosphere. Well, Oaxaca's turning into sort of a Noma gringo atmosphere, and it's just, it's hard. So now people ask me, oh, I'm going to Oaxaca, where should I go? And I'm going to stop telling people, like, you should go to the market and find the busiest stall and see if that looks appealing to you, and then you should just go try it. Mm-hmm. I think it's just so rapid, and people just check. I went to this restaurant because I was in Oaxaca and it was really good, and there I saw Oaxaca. It's like, yeah. So
well, that's like me. We went to Mexico City, so we went to Pujol, and we went to all the.
You should go to those places.
Yeah,
I'm not saying not to go, but you should also get lost and eat a taco on the street.
I know, which I'm not good at. I think it goes back to control and like wanting to know where we're gonna go, what we're gonna do. But I agree that like I should be more adventurous when I travel. But this is not my therapy though. This is your therapy.
We might turn this around a little bit.
Yeah, maybe.
A free associate.
So one thing that I'm a little unclear about, and I kind of want to go back to it, is like you talked about your mom not being a great cook and your dad cooking well, but in terms, because you live in Napa, which is like some of the most refined, for lack of a better word, like fanciest restaurants. I mean, French Laundry is there and all this stuff, and wineries. And so I guess I'm trying to get a sense of the journey that you went on with your knowledge of food. That's sort of what I asked earlier, but I guess I wanted to understand more about your education and was the food that your parents cooked similar to the food that you still eat now, or did something change along the way?
Well, everyone thinks the food revolution just happened recently, and I don't mean to seem snobby, but in the Bay Area, you could eat really well in the 60s and 70s here. Mm-hmm. I mean, we had how many bakeries that you just knew you didn't buy bread on Wednesday because that was the day they were closed. But we had so many sourdough bakeries that aren't even there anymore. Really.
And this is where you grew up, right? You grew up in Sausalito, is that right?
Yes. But okay. Do you know where I was born?
Where?
In the Scientology building. In LA.
In LA, really?
Yes.
How did that come about?
Well, my parents lived my mother was from Orange County and my father was from Chicago, and they lived in LA when they were first married. And that was Cedars of Lebanon at that point. It wasn't.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Scientologist. Yeah.
Oh, that would have been really interesting. Okay.
Yeah, you could take no. Yeah,
so you were saying that. So you grew up with like good bread. So you were in an area where there was good food to begin with as a kid.
Yes, and My dad used to go diving for abalone.
Wow.
We grew up like every ashtray in the house was an abalone shell, but they smoked a lot in those days. So in the mornings after a party, it would smell like bad gin and cigarette butts and steak fat. And I remember seeing the abalone ashtrays. They all had these little holes because abalone had the 5 or 6 holes, I think. So they were just these ash piles. Or anyway, so that's but it's my long-winded to say you could eat well at that point. So I think the aspect of having people over was just embedded pretty early.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Well, it also is making me think a little bit about, I guess I sense from you, and I've only known you now about 30 minutes, but a lack of elitism. Like it doesn't feel like what you do or the world you came from or the world that you're currently inhabiting is about holding yourself above others because of your knowledge of food or anything. It feels like you're very much, grounded and have your feet on the ground, which is not necessarily true of a lot of the people where you live. Like,
or me. No, it is. But you know what? I think early on, being gay and not being validated in so many ways, is like I realized the mainstream was never going to work for me.
Mhm.
And I think so. I'm not elitist in that sense, but I am sort of a counterculture snob, I would think. I really don't enjoy a lot of mainstream culture. I really prefer jazz to rock. I prefer pork to steak, pork to beef, I don't know, or chicken,
Right.
I don't know. So I think somewhere in there, it's not elitist, but there is sort of a snobism I think I might have. Just
That makes
maybe.
sense. Yeah, but I guess specifically though with your approach to food and like beans and stuff, it feels like beans are not, as much as you're packaging them in these beautiful packages and they look like jewels, they're a humble ingredient. They're not
Right.
like $60 olive oil or whatever.
No, but I also think, because troubles or hard times, I was a very irresponsible younger person financially. So I've also had this, not a survival technique, but it's like, oh, look, I can forage the cactus packets and eat them. That's a great thing. Beans are cheap. I can keep them there. So I always have that. It's almost like a weird sort of preparing a bit.
Yeah. Well, that's a good question is like in terms of frugality, because that's the other element of your lunch was that, you were using a cactus from the parking lot and,
right.
Leftover beans. So are you a frugal person, generally speaking?
I used to think I was, but actually I just find waste offensive. So I'm maybe not the most frugal person, but I think wasting, and as anyone who works here will tell you, I'm irrational sometimes about certain things. But I think waste is offensive, whether it's energy or food. I was with somebody for a while who would just buy whatever they thought they might want and then throw it away when it went bad. And it's like, that's meat. You can't, that to me is like really a sin. But and I'm not moral or religious, but it's like, you can't buy meat and not eat it. That's about as bad as it gets to me.
Yeah, it's funny because I'm testing a cookbook right now. And so I have to cook all these things. And, sometimes it's like, okay, I made like liver pate and it had 2 sticks of butter in it. And it was like a giant thing of it. And Craig was like, we can't waste this. My partner, Craig, we can't waste this. So he was like eating it for lunch every day, putting on crackers. And I was like, Craig, I don't think you have to eat the entire bowl of liver pate. It's not good for you.
Once in a while for the greater cause. But actually, I have an unnatural love of chicken liver pate. And, from Jewish delis to real high-end French things, there's something about it that's just one of my, and yeah, I love that. I was going to go into duck, but we won't even start there.
Well, one thing I wanted to ask you, because it's related to kind of what we were just talking about, frugality and people working with you. So, because it seems like you have a very creative side, and you talked about the side of you that's sort of, fringe or what's the word, like lack of conventional or unconventional. Yes. But then you're also running a business. And so I'm curious, like, how do you reconcile those two things? Like, was it difficult for you to become a business owner? And did it take a while to get the knack of it? Is that the right?
I'm still very much learning. I don't think I've arrived at that. But when I used to live in San Francisco, the rent would be due. I wouldn't have enough rent. And I'd say, well, since I don't have the rent, I have some money, I might as well go to Tower Records. I mean, that seemed totally logical.
Yeah,
to me. So
I'm the same way. That's exactly me. Yeah.
As long as I can't pay it, I might as well go have some fun.
Yes.
And then early, when I was really young, I think I probably shouldn't admit this, but my first girlfriend and I would write each other checks on Friday for like $100, then go to our own banks and cash the other ones. And then, oh, we have $200 for the weekend. And we didn't have any money to start at all. So it was like, that's how irresponsible I was. So to be running a multi-million-dollar company is like hysterical. But I don't know where I fit politically in some of this stuff, but capitalism is what we have. So how do you make it the best case scenario? So our entry level is 18 an hour, like whether you work in the store or the warehouse. We have really great benefits. We, donate a certain. I go out on a limb a couple of times. I've gotten in trouble for we were working with FedEx and loving the service, but they were actually giving a discount to NRA members. So we actually had a big, huge public fuss. We actually dropped them for about a year until they stopped.
Wow.
How much we had to do with it. And we went to UPS, which for our needs, I'm not saying it's a bad company, but it wasn't as good a fit, and it was really painful. But so my staff hates when I go on a Jag. We also we give a percentage of the Mexican beans we send to the border. There's this great group called No More Death. I almost said No More Tears, the old Barbara Streisand. Summer, No More Tears.
Right. Donna
No More
Summer.
Deaths.
Yeah.
Yes. And they actually provide water for people trying to cross this horrible desert. So, I mean, there's certain little things like that. It's like, okay, this is capitalism, but I think you have to be a responsible corporate citizen. And so those are kind of the things that we do. And that, for me, makes it actually fun to see, in a weird way, how profitable can we be so we can spread that a bit.
So what was the moment like, going from the guy that was like cashing your friends' checks to running a multi-million-dollar business? Like, I mean, was there a moment when you started Rancho Gordo? Because I imagine at the very beginning, it was just sort of almost like a fluke, like, let me just throw some beans in a bag and see what happens. But did it click over at some point, like, oh, I am running a big business here and I better get my act together? I mean, was it like that?
I think there was one rainy morning at 5 a.m. where I had to get up to go to the farmer's market, and I looked over at my neighbor's house and the smoke was coming out of the chimney and it looked so cozy. And it was like, oh my God, you know what? Screw it. I'm not going to go. And it's like, no, there might be that one person who's coming in the rain to see me. I have to go. And I think that was the day I grew up in a weird way. It was sort of
responsible.
like, oh, it's bigger than me now. Is there actually, what if someone is planning a dinner party and coming to the farmer's market just to see me? And I thought, I can't do that. So I went. And I think it sounds silly, and I've never talked about this before, but I actually think that might have been one of the few moments. It's like, okay, this will pay off. If not today, some other time.
And it's interesting because it was not about you and your own pleasure and like going to buy records at Tower Records. It was like about somebody else's needs. It was sort of like leaving your own self for somebody, that's what the step was to grow.
Isn't that funny? Yeah. And the funny thing is, even odder, is I had a long, boring, I tried a million different jobs, and I just basically said, I give up. I can't do this, because there's always someone younger and smarter and cheaper willing to take your job, it seemed like. So that's when I decided to get a garden and maybe get a job at Target and see how it goes. And it's at the point when I thought, I'm only going to do this for me, that I actually had the success. So even with the label, I thought, well, what do I want? When I open my pantry, what do I want to see? It's like, I want to see that. I don't want to see, Nestle's Quick or something. I want to see a lady with licking her lips because the food's so good.
So how do you deal with it? Because you seem like a very nice guy and affable and pleasant, but like knowing your background, just knowing that you kind of grew up kind of marginalized, but also, like marching to the beat of your own drum. I guess I'm curious, like, how do you deal with something like having to fire somebody or yell at somebody, or somebody doesn't do what they're supposed to do and the beans don't come in? Like, is that difficult for you to deal with that kind of stuff, or does it come naturally?
No, I hate it. Firing people's the worst. I really would rather not do that again. No, it stresses me out to no end. I feel it deeply, and that's what I would say. I can't give you any advice to anybody on that.
Right. But in terms of your, like, who you are, it seems contrary to who you are to have to fill those shoes of being a business owner, of having to do that. Yeah.
We're bigger now. So we have 26 employees between the warehouse and here. And I've got really great staff, and we're all trying to do the same thing. So hopefully it doesn't come up all that often.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm curious. You mentioned having children. So
Mhm.
one thing that wanted to know is what food knowledge did you pass down to your children, and are they cooks themselves? Do they like to cook? No.
Well, the oldest has some real picky habits,
Okay.
which I totally blame on his mother. No, I remember gardening with him, and we harvested tomatoes and we made tomato sauce, and then I made him make it. So he was probably like 8, and then we put it on pasta, and he ate it like a banshee. And then the mother's like, he doesn't eat tomatoes. I was like, well, when you grow them yourself, and he's cooking them, maybe he does. And then,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he won't eat tomatoes now. Um, so
That's funny.
yeah, but oddly, he loves cilantro. So I mean, I can't figure this whole thing out. He actually doesn't have horrible taste, but he really likes simple food, and he likes ingredients to really be their thing. So
Uh-huh.
I would say that. And I think he's more like Cole, let's go.
All right.
And his love
Food's
of
not
food.
his
I
thing.
think it's
Yeah.
really like, but then the younger son, who, was quite rambunctious and everything. He moved to Holland, and he's actually studying agriculture, and he'll
Wow.
eat anything. And he actually worked locally at our local charcuterie, the Fatted Calf. He worked there, and he has a really strong work ethic, and he wants no part of Rancho Gordo, but at the same time, he's doing all this stuff that is totally related to it. So
Wow.
it's pretty good. Yeah.
That's so funny because it's like I don't think we're gonna have children, but that is the fantasy for me. Is like, well, if I had a kid, I would be in the kitchen with them and showing them
And
all
then
the
if
stuff.
that's your fantasy, that's the last thing you're going to get. You're going to get
Yeah.
a eater who wants Lunchables. If that's really what
Right.
you want, they're going to
Totally.
they can smell it.
That'll be their rebellion. Well, I know that I read a bit about you before this interview, did a little research, but I think it was maybe the New Yorker. And you talked about it a little earlier about this dynamic that you had with your children's mother, and that there was a marriage or something. But maybe, like, I don't know if you want to go into all that. But...
Now it's not digestible really. So
Okay, it's not digestible. We won't go there. Okay,
yeah.
but I guess in terms of you creating a home for yourself, the way you populate your life, it feels like you not just created a home for yourself, but created almost like a little village for yourself with like your mother living next door.
And it's pretty rural, but it's a mountain, so I know a lot of the neighbors, and some of them are older, and I have them over all the time. And that was the first thing we did after we all got vaccinated, was get together for dinners.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's definitely a nice little community now.
So when you have people over for dinner, I mean, I imagine beans are often on the menu. But what else? What else are you cooking for people?
Well, you know what's so funny? I used to think you had to come up with this incredible menu every time you had a dinner party, but then you realize it's sort of seasonal, and you don't usually have the same people over. So it's like you almost get like I get like a quarterly menu that I refine, retweak, and so I was doing really for a long time poblano chilies with cream and chicken, and like a chicken with a poblano cream sauce. That was always the main thing. And then when corn is in season, I learned this at the hacienda. They turn the pans up super high, and they just put epazote, which is a pretty strong herb, and salt and a chili, and no oil, no nothing else. And then they kind of char it, and it's absolutely. So you get your seasonal things. And right now I've been doing fish in fig leaves because I have a beautiful fig tree, and I had no idea that figs leaves impart such flavor. It's almost this vanilla-y fruit thing.
Yeah,
Really
David
great.
Leibovitz has a recipe on his blog for fig leaf ice cream.
Oh wow, yeah.
And there's a fig tree that one of my neighbors has in front of their house. I don't know if it's their tree, but there's all these leaves on it, and I keep wanting to kind of sneak over there with a pair of scissors and just like.
Oh, I bet they'd love it. I mean,
you think so?
Oh,
I don't know them. These are strangers. So I've literally never met them. They're like,
what an nice way to meet them
by cutting off their fig leaves. Maybe
you
I'll
be careful when you do cut them, or if I was just ripping them out, and they have this white sap that many people, including myself, react to. So it actually gives you this horrible rash.
Oh
so
no!
Really, just respectful. It's not scary, but just be respectful of it.
Okay.
But actually, when you dry the leaves, you can make a tea that apparently is really good for diabetics and lowering blood sugar. I have these beautiful, not cast iron, but blue iron. Or what do you call them? I'm sorry, I'm having a moment.
Like Le Creuset, like
No, but it's full on forged, hammered steel. It's just steel.
A carbon steel?
Carbon steel, yes.
Yeah.
Been a long day. So I put the leaves in the bottom. I add the marinated fish, and I put leaves on top, and then I just bake it. And it's out of this world. And the leaves get really hard and crunchy on the top, and it just imparts everything. So it's been really fun.
So is your cuisine, I mean, when you talk about doing the corn and I guess some of the other stuff, like, oh, the poblano chilies, like, do you feel like your cuisine is generally like Mexican influenced mostly?
It used to be more. In fact, I would be really proud if I didn't make Mexican. Oh, look, this is a Mexican. But, I think you get older, they tell me, and you just sort of get your groove. I call it new hacienda cooking.
New hacienda cooking. That sounds like the name of a cookbook.
There's a good one. I live in an old church, actually. It was built in 1930. And it was Seventh-day Adventist, so it was rather bland. I mean, there's not a lot of ornamentation. And even though I'm an atheist, I'm turning it into a Catholic nightmare because I just love colonial art in particular. But it has a hacienda feel. So I do think there's something gracious about that.
So in terms of Mexican cooking at home, like for me, I don't do that much of it. I've made tortillas before, like with masa, but is there a certain book or a certain place that you would recommend for people to start that you like? I mean, I know that Diane Kennedy has her books and Rick Bayless has his books, but is there like somebody maybe more obscure?
This is surprising, but one of the best Mexican cookbooks to me is called Frida's Fiestas. And it's in Mexico, it's called Frida and Diego, but of course we don't even know who Diego Rivera is here, so they market as that. And it's from his stepdaughter, and it talks about the parties that Diego and Frida would throw. And it has the occasion, and it has the menus, and then it has the recipes. And the recipes are a tiny bit vague, but not scary vague.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I've never cooked a bad thing from it. And I think that to me is one of the best examples of Mexican cooking all around is that. But hopefully that's the first book, and then you get one of Patty's books, maybe you get one of Diana's books, and Rick Bayless, especially his earlier books, I think are even better. So, and the Zarela Oaxaca book. So, as a foodie, the Oaxaca book came out, I think, in the early 90s, and it just changed everything. So everyone's just discovering Oaxaca, but foodies have known about it for a really long time. And that book holds up, which is really kind of exciting.
Who wrote that book? Do you know?
Zarela Martinez.
Oh, yeah. Because she has a restaurant in New York, right?
Yeah. And she also wrote a great book on Veracruz, which you didn't ask about. If I could go anywhere in Mexico, Veracruz is the place to eat. It's like going to Bologna when you go to Italy. It's just, it's so specific and delicious that it's worth going to see. Unfortunately, it's super dangerous right now.
Oh, is it?
But hopefully things will calm down.
I'm glad you told me about that book. I love like off the beaten path book, like Frida's Fiestas. Like,
it's great.
I'm gonna go find that.
It's gorgeous, and it's a little bit of everything. And I found the vagueness of the recipes refreshing, and everything comes out. And her mole negro recipe, and mole really is more a party dish. It's not an everyday dish. And she goes into it, and it's terrific. Although recently, the new Oaxaca book by the people who own Guelaguetza, and I can't remember their names.
Oh, yeah.
I know Javier Cabral.
I just had her on my podcast.
Oh, good.
Brisha Lopez was one of the owners.
Great. I think that was really ugly. Just
hopefully she's not listening. Yeah.
But inside, the photography is great and the recipes are great. And it isn't, I don't think, a great representation of all Oaxacan food, but it's definitely that family's Oaxacan food, and it's completely that. It's a great book. I think everyone should get that one.
And so with mole, how often do you make mole? And
once every 5 years.
Because it's a lot of work.
Yeah, no, and it's so funny you watch Top Chef and everything. So I did it in a mole. So and you're very liberal with that word.
Well, this season, I feel like mole is like almost every episode that guy is making mole.
Yeah, so I think probably technically it might be, but it's not really that. Can you use the word sauce? Fine. I mean, I don't know. There are many moles, but it's a tough one.
He's doing really well, that guy. I forgot his name, but tonight's the finale, so I'm curious. Do you know who I'm talking about?
Yeah. And you know what? All three of them are great. Like, I actually wouldn't be upset who wins. Like, I know they're all three like great cooks, and they seem like nice people. So
I'm going tonight to a new restaurant in LA called Damien, I think it's called, and I think it's from Enrique Oliveira. Is that his name?
Yeah.
From Pujol, and I think
Oh,
so.
nice.
It's his new LA restaurant, so it'll be interesting to try.
They might have our beans.
Oh,
he's been a supporter for a while.
well, so Steve, we're not quite at the end of the podcast, but we're nearing the end, and I feel, I don't know, did I get everywhere with you? I mean, do you feel like I zeroed in on some stuff, or do you feel like we missed some parts?
I'm a hoarder and controlling, irresponsible. Like I see.
Yeah, okay, that's true. Yeah, we got all that.
Yeah,
And
you got me pegged. Yeah.
well, you seem very casual. You don't feel, it almost feels like you stumbled into this business rather than like, you don't seem like this ferocious. You're not like Gordon Gekko on Wall Street, like, biting off the heads of live chickens to like run your business.
No, but.
Yeah.
That's the really interesting thing is I think that part's misleading and that I'm casual about it. So I did stumble into it, but I think really early I recognized, okay, this could work. So you don't screw this up the way you screw everything else up.
Yeah.
So I have a little bit of that in me, but I think sometimes people watch me doing it and they're like, oh, I could do it better than him. He's not even trying. And I think it's shocking to realize how hard this is.
Well, I think it's probably a very useful strategy to come across as, not that you're consciously doing it, but to be like affable and relaxed, and then also be running a business.
Yes. So this is, I think, with the business, I think you have to be really clear about what you expect. And then I'm not the type of person that wants to follow through. It's like you did it or you didn't. And I'm praying you're going to come to me if you need help, but I'm not going to sit there and oversee everything you're doing. So that doesn't work for everybody. We've had some perfectly talented people that haven't worked, but if that kind of independence works, I think I'm a really good boss if that's what you want. And if not, I'm probably cold and dim.
I can't imagine that. Well, I was curious, like when you look back on the business and you think about the components that made it such a success, do you think it came down to the design? Do you think it came down to the marketing? Do you think it came down to the taste, or do you think it was all of it?
I haven't taken that victory lap yet to really look at it. We're so right in the thick of it. I haven't figured out what it is, why it's working. I do find, people don't know this, but I actually literally write every newsletter and I write all the copy for the website. And sometimes I feel like I'm a writer, even though I'm not. But I think I'm doing it because I just really love it. I love telling the story and imparting the secret, much like, say with Mexico, it's like, or even when I was really into Italy and I lived there for a while and I was like, oh, let me tell you my little story. So I love that part of it, I think, but I don't, this is our 20th year and I still haven't, the unexamined life isn't worth living, I guess, but I still haven't examined this yet to figure out what.
Well, I think it's I think you took an everyday ingredient that most people took for granted and showed them how it could be special. And it's sort of like, there might not have been a demand for that, but you created that demand. Yes. And now there is.
I would say that, but I also know how lucky I am because there's a lot of people that are talented and work really hard and don't get anywhere. So it just I was the right guy with the right product at the right time. And I've had a really good time all along the way, but it wasn't until this that I really had success. And so I think I appreciate it more than most people do because it was late and I don't take it for granted. I don't take it too seriously too on some level. But I don't know. One day I will look back on this and say, oh, you know what I did right was that logo.
Well, yeah, I think you did a lot of things right. Well, Steve, so we're nearing the end, and I usually start every podcast by asking what you had for lunch, but I end every podcast by asking, what are you having for dinner tonight?
Probably, to be honest with you, I'm seeing my oldest, and we're going to go get a burrito somewhere probably. And,
okay.
Which is very interesting because most Mexicans in Napa are from Michoacan or Jalisco, and we have the most generic taco culture here that it really, there's an opportunity for somebody is to open a regional Mexican restaurant here.
That sounds like a good idea.
And not that I have anything against, young gringo chefs doing an interesting new take on tacos, but it could, there is opportunity for regional food because there is interesting takes on street food. I think are super boring at this point.
I'm curious. Well, it feels like the culture of Napa, like with Thomas Keller and the French Laundry, which it used to be like when I thought of Napa and I thought of restaurants, like that's what I would think about immediately. But it feels like the culture in the food world has shifted so much that that doesn't feel like the center of the culinary universe anymore. And I'm curious, like, has Napa itself shifted in terms of the kind of restaurants that are popping up there and the kind of food that's being made there?
Yes, I mean, it's really expensive to do something here. So unfortunately, it's super budget or super special event food, and it isn't really my thing. So that's another reason why I live in my little bubble up on my mountain
Right.
and have dinner parties and friends.
So you really live on a mountain?
I do. Mount Leader, yeah.
And so is it like its own town, or it's just like a
No, no,
house?
I'm incorporated part of town, and it's a super windy road that ends up going to the next county over, which is Sonoma. And it's great. I don't want to tell too many people about it, but
Yeah, don't give away your secrets.
No.
Well, it's funny, the best meal that I had in Napa, I'm so sad it closed, was at Cindy's Backstreet Kitchen.
Oh, she's so great. Yeah.
Yeah, and I actually was doing a book tour for my last book, and I had to drive from San Francisco to Napa to do an event there, which was its own funny story involving lentils, which I could tell in a second. But I remember I was in so much traffic on the drive from San Francisco to Napa that when I got to Napa, I was starving, and I drove up to Cindy's Backstreet Kitchen, and I sat at the bar, and I think I ordered like short ribs and a glass of red wine, and it was truly the best meal I think I've ever had, just because of how hungry I was, but also how soul satisfying it was.
Well, she's an amazing cook too. So she's still around. I mean, she's still involved with mustards, and she's Cindy Paulson, and
Yeah.
her books are great too.
I have heard Cindy's Supper Club.
Yeah.
So the other part of the story with the lentils, I'll just tell you because you'll get a kick out of this, was that the reason I was going to Napa was I had to do a cooking demonstration at the Whole Foods in Napa. And so I was demoing the lentil soup from my cookbook, and I was in front of like an empty room. It was like 3 old ladies in the front row. And so I was like, here's how you make lentil soup. Here's it. And then at some point, this woman was like, you forgot to add the lentils. And I'd actually forgotten to put the lentils in the lentil soup.
Well, next time, come do it at Rancho Gordo. We have a retail store, and before COVID, we actually had events all the time.
Yeah.
And we've had Diana Kennedy, we've had Deborah Madison, we've had a bunch of people come. So we'd love to have you too.
I'd love to do that. Yeah.
Once we open up completely, we're almost there.
So what does the future have in store in terms of Rancho Gordo products?
Well, I mean, there's always new books coming out. And I was going to tell you, the book industry, you may not know this, but it's completely corrupt and really opaque. So we just thought, screw it. So we started Rancho Gordo Press. So we're only publishing our own books. So I've got a couple of books. We're actually starting Rancho Gordo Casa. This is a scoop for you. So we're actually doing housewares coming. Our big anniversary is this fall. So we're launching this housewares thing. So a lot of the stuff that we like, so it's stuff for the kitchen and cooking and things. And it's been very hard because you think, oh, these are nice napkins. It's like, I would never buy them. I mean, and they look like you got them at Bed Bath & Beyond for your daughter who's got her first apartment. Not really. Like, I'm really kind of snotty. So we're doing that. But we might actually be selling some of the Spratling silver. But then we're having a big party at the Native Sons Hall in St. Helena, and we've got a great cumbia band coming. That's coming in the fall. And then I think I'm going to take a really long vacation.
Where will you go?
Mexico. I don't know. Mexico probably, yeah.
How often do you go to Mexico?
Well, at the height of it, I would go 4 or 5 times a year. But it has been very painful not being able to go. So I just went this time. I mean, going forward, well, I'll go as much as I can, actually.
And what was the place you said that it was like Bologna?
Oh, Veracruz. It's a whole state, and it's on the coast, and it has a real, like, the music they listen to is really more Cuban. So it was a important port in the day.
And what are the other like highlights for you? Like, I guess Oaxaca's changing, but if you were telling somebody like where to visit in Mexico, like, are there other places you would recommend since you go so often?
So hard. Well, the state of Michoacan is great, and people don't know it. And I think a lot of times here, at least in California, we take it for granted because everyone's from there, but that's crazy. It has really great food. And if you go to the town of Morelia, it's probably, I don't know, everything right now is kind of hot between COVID and the narco thing. believe in being fearful, but you can't be stupid too.
Mm-hmm.
And I would just add on a political note, we're the ones who take the drugs. So it's our problem too. It's not just this, oh, the Mexicans can't get it together. If we weren't taking drugs, this wouldn't be happening, is what I'll just say that.
Yeah, that's
without
a good
hitting
point.
you over the head. It's like, it's our problem. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Well, yeah, these are great tips. I realized there was one question I forgot to ask you, and then we'll be done.
Okay.
And it's, again, one of those questions you probably get all the time, but where did Rancho Gordo come from?
Okay, so this is true. When I used to be a web designer, and when people were buying domains, I went to get Rancho Grande, because there's that famous song "Allá" in Rancho Grande, and of course it was taken. And I thought, oh, Rancho Gordo is kind of funny. Let's just get that. So I just parked it, and then I thought, I'm going to do a diet where you could lose weight eating Mexican food. Well, clearly I never even attempted it. But,
Right.
And then when I started farming, it's like, oh, I own Rancho Gordo. Let's just try that.
Great.
And also and this is again, the luck is like gringos think Rancho Gordo, oh, I'm speaking Spanish. Like if we were called Lo Wache or Loco or something, it's like people can't wrap their tongues around that, but everybody can say Rancho Gordo.
Oh, yeah.
And also probably even know what it means. And like, so.
And do they think your name is Rancho Gordo when they meet you?
I think my name is Gordo sometimes, yes.
Gordo.
I'm a little robust. So yes.
Oh,
yeah.
I forgot that's what that meant. That was in the roots of the business, though. That was in the beginning, the name.
Oh, and I was thinking, even though it means fat ranch, I was kind of thinking fat farm, and that would be a good way to lose weight. Which you could. The pre-conquest diet is amazing in Mexico. So if you could take out all the stuff the Spanish brought and eat what indigenous people ate in Mesoamerica, you'd have an incredibly healthy diet.
That sounds like a good trend, like the Mesoamerican diet.
Well, there's a great book, Decolonize Your Diet, or is it called Decolonize Your Diet?
I don't know. That one I don't
know.
I can't help you there.
My brain is like, so much goes in.
Yeah. No, you're doing great. We learned a lot. You taught us so many different things. So thank you so much for doing lunch therapy.
It's really been a hoot, and I hope we get to do it in person sooner than later.
Yeah, I'd love to come visit you up in Napa. So, well, good luck with everything, and thanks again.
Thank you. All right.
I'll talk to you soon.
All right.
Bye.